Hi, good evening. My name is Nichola Naraine-Assad. Tonight I'm going to be presenting Toward the World We Inherited, Democratic Party and Workers' Plight. Today we are going to look at the democracy in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic by taking a closer look at how the history of this party's policies and actions have affected society at large. Within each tragedy that has hit our nation, whether it's Hurricane Katrina or the COVID-19 pandemic, the core issue that resonates with democratic policy is the overall lack of initiatives for the lower class, for people of color, and for the people we classify as essential workers. These are the key considerations we are addressing in this discussion. In this quote, Plato provides key insight into the issue of democracy that paints a relatable picture to the history of this form of government, and more specifically, of this nation's Democratic Party. Plato, Republic, Book 6, argues that democracy is inferior to various forms of monarchy, aristocracy, and even oligarchy in the grounds that democracy tends to undermine the expertise necessary to govern societies. In a democracy, he argues, those who are expert at winning elections and nothing else will eventually dominate democratic politics. Democracy tends to emphasize this expertise at the expense of the expertise that is necessary to properly govern societies. The reason for this is that most people do not have the kinds of talents that enable them to think well about the difficult issues that politics involves. But in order to win office or get a piece of legislation passed, politicians must appeal to these people's sense of what is right or not right. Hence, the state will be guided by very poorly worked out ideas that experts in manipulation and mass appeal use to help themselves win office. Democrats versus coronavirus. Democratic Governor Phil Murphy shared this graphic via his Twitter account, giving us a snapshot of the current numbers of COVID cases in the state per 100,000. What this snapshot says to us is that we are far from being out of danger. New Jersey has been and is continuing to be severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet, according to our local media sources, our governor is seeking to begin reopening public spaces, non-essential businesses, and even beaches before Memorial Day weekend. Why? It is truly to give citizens reassurance and a sense of normalcy. Is the potential risk involved worth that notion, or is it motivated by the hallmark characteristic of our Democratic Party? Their decade-long devotion to capitalistic and corporate gains, their dedication to corporate enterprise at the expense of the lower class, impoverished, and immigrant populations continue to be prominent with the schema of COVID pandemic. Ras Baraka, mayor of Newark, calls upon county and state dollars for assistance in aiding Newark and New Jersey at large. He calls out for the passage of the Senator Bob Menendez's new bill for federal reserves to provide aid to local, state, and country debts. While these actions appear to alleviate rising concerns in state and local deficits and fundings, the larger question remains: how will the people ultimately be aided in coping with the effects of this pandemic? Referring back to Clinton's welfare reform policy and the corporatized culture of the Democratic Party, recent history gives us little reason to believe these policies will ultimately go towards benefiting the people. On March 2, 2020, Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio stated the displayed quote. Here, it is evident that though there were clear warnings and high-risk indicators early on in the spread of this pandemic, it was not taken seriously by governing officials in the United States. This example, while it specifically refers to New York, is reflective on the nation at large and reflects a governmental failure to act appropriately to the threat of the COVID-19 virus. The plight of essential workers has been sensationalized and celebrated in the media. However, this population of people and their families are being put at severe risk. Historically, policy and aid has not severed all classes of people fairly. Howard Zinn states in his article that focuses on the fallacies of democratic policies that, quote, it was therefore possible to say that the US economy was healthy, but only if you consider the richest part of the population. Meanwhile, 40 million people were without health insurance and infants died of sickness and malnutrition at a higher rate than that of any other industrialized country. For people of color, the statistics were worse. Infants died at twice the rate of white children, and the life expectancy of a black man in Harlem, according to a United Nations report, was 46 years less than that in Cambodia or in Sudan. The democracy of our nation idolizes a myth. The lower class and people of color are consistently put at severe disadvantage. The truth is no different in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. During his presidency, Bill Clinton signed the welfare reform policy into effect. While this policy was deemed to be the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, it did not serve struggling populations in any capacity. Howard Zinn's History is a Weapon clearly emphasizes this truth by stating, its aim was to force poor families receiving federal cash benefits, many of them single mothers with children, to go to work by cutting off their benefits after 2 years, limiting lifetime benefits to 5 years, and allowing people without children to get food stamps for only 3 months in any 3-year period. While it is essential to promote a sense of motivation for the people to pursue employment, is this approach truly liberal? More importantly to note is the tone of deprioritizing the well-being of the people, particularly during the Clinton administration, when corporate enterprise rose and took center stage. More important, in 2008, during the Obama administration, there was a stock market crash when the housing bubble burst. People lost their homes and retirement savings, but financial institutions who created the bubbles were bailed out. Let us consider Clinton's welfare reform and the one prominent action that was not taken. Zinn's article informs us that while benefits were limited and cutoffs were established, there also was the failure of this administration to create programming aimed towards opening up job opportunities for the people, unlike that of the New Deal era. This tone has permeated throughout the Democratic Party and its politicians, and we see that in effect even today as America struggles to cope with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. This was evident in our earlier discussion of Mayor Ras Baraka as well. Our government figures are repeating the pattern established seen as far back as Clinton's welfare reform. Government established a free market policy that left Americans without jobs, adequate health care, housing, or access to education. During the COVID-19 pandemic, temporary relief has been granted through unemployment benefits without emphasis on long-term solutions. Workers that are deemed essential have been granted the same stimulus amounts as all Americans with no additional benefits discussed for the risk that is inherent with being an essential worker. Access to the treatment should be a human right. Pharma companies benefiting. The Democrats seem to lack the cohesion and power to effectively address issues that impact the middle and lower classes. During the Clinton administration, he preferred to support conservative judges and figures rather than strengthen a more liberal aligned foundation within the different branches of government. This ultimately reinforced conservatism within the government, including in matters of policy. Let us consider matters such as governmental awards of grants to entities such as J.P. Morgan Chase and Citibank's controversial involvement in assisting Mexico with laundering money in the amount of hundreds of millions of dollars. Ironically, this act was essentially excused with minimal governmental penalty. However, let us consider matters pertaining to free trade, also known as NAFTA, during the Clinton administration. NAFTA focused on national interests, and the concept of free trade was almost invisible within the constructs of this agreement. Zinn's article states, the United States went to lengths to prevent tomato growers in Mexico from entering the U.S. market and put pressure on Thailand to open its markets to American tobacco companies. Even while at home, mounting public protests led to restrictions on the sale of tobacco. So we have a corporate magnate such as Citibank involved with illegal activity with Mexican cartels. However, a free trade agreement restricts tomato growers in Mexico to join the U.S. market in trade and commerce. This disparity is particularly emphasized by the lack of strong regulations against large corporations. We also have the matter of Franklin Delano Raines, who is in charge of Freddie Mac and the Fannie Mae program and overstated Fannie Mae earnings by over $10 million. He then became Clinton's budget director. Corruption and corporatization is rewarded under this body of government. This is the sad reality even with big pharmaceutical companies who pursue financial gains rather than acting in the best interest of and for the health and safety of the people, even in the face of this pandemic, where we are without a solid treatment plan supported by medication or any type of vaccination. America thrives on the taxpayers' dollars. We ask ourselves, where are some of these big-ticket dollars today during this COVID-19 pandemic? Where is the taxation levied on the rich, on the high-earning individuals and corporate? UBS Financial Service was caught helping Americans evade taxes. The Democratic politicians ultimately excuse these actions by corporations, viewing them as mistakes, which ultimately deprives the people of resources and financial assistance and programs they need. As a survivor of the COVID-19 virus, I had to adjust my lifestyle accordingly. I do work in a facility that has a lot of people of color, and it does endorse this argument of people of color being treated more unfair than the people that are white. We were not allowed to be tested unless we were really sick. Unfortunately, a lot of us were left to suffer. A lot of us obviously spread the virus to each other, and it was not easy. I'm thankful that I have survived, but it was a hard battle supporting my family with those responsibilities and being sick at the same time. With this, I want to say thank you for your time. Stay well and stay healthy.